The chandelier in the Forsyth Park mansion flickered once, then died. Ethan Whitaker stood alone in the dark, phone still warm against his ear from the lawyer's final words. "It's gone, Ethan. Everything." 10 hours earlier he'd been worth $9.4 billion. Now the gates were chained, the staff sent home with severance he couldn't actually pay yet, and the marble floors echoed like a tomb. He poured the last of a 30-year Macallan into a crystal tumbler, didn't bother with ice, and walked out the back door into the garden. Spanish moss hung low, brushing his shoulders like ghosts. He kept walking until the iron fence stopped him, then climbed over it because the code on the gate no longer worked in his name. That's how a barefoot billionaire in a wrinkled Tom Ford shirt ended up on the sidewalk of East Jones Street at 3 in the morning, glass in hand, staring at the moon like it owed him an explanation. Across the street, a soft yellow glow spilled from the open door of Harlow House, a 1870s bed and breakfast his assistant once told him was quaint. A woman stepped onto the porch carrying a tray of beignet dusted with powdered sugar. The smell hit him like a memory he didn't know he had. She noticed him immediately, hard not to when a grown man is bleeding from climbing an iron spike. "You all right, sugar?" Her voice carried across the street, low and warm like midnight honey. Ethan looked down at his hand, only then feeling the sting. "I used to live here," he said, nodding toward the dark mansion behind him. The woman set the tray on the porch rail, wiped her hands on the apron tied over jeans, and crossed the street without hesitation. Up close she was maybe 34, skin like polished mahogany, locks pulled into a thick bun threaded with gold cuffs. Her eyes held the kind of calm that comes from surviving worse nights than this one. "I'm Jasmine Harlow," she said, the woman who now technically owned the mortgage on half his life, whether she knew it or not. "And you're bleeding on my azaleas." He laughed, actually laughed, raw and cracked. "Ethan Whitaker. And I think I just lost everything I own." Jasmine studied him for a long seconds, then reached out, plucked the empty tumbler from his grip, and replaced it with a warm beignet. "Eat this before you pass out. Rich men always forget to eat when the money disappears." He bit into it. Powdered sugar exploded across the front of his $5,000 shirt. For some reason that made the laughter come harder, until it turned into something that hurt his chest. Jasmine didn't flinch. She simply took his uninjured hand and led him up her porch steps. "Come on inside, Mr. Whitaker. We'll patch that hand and you can tell me how a man loses $9 billion before breakfast." He followed her like a drowning man follows light. Inside, the house smelled like vanilla, old wood, and bacon just starting to curl in a skillet. She sat him at the kitchen island, pulled out a proper first aid kit, and started cleaning the gash without asking permission. "You always thought when it all went away I'd feel smaller," he said quietly. "But I don't. I feel huge. Like there's finally room to breathe." Jasmine met his eyes, gentle but unflinching. Sometimes the Lord has to strip a man bare before he remembers who he was before the money told him who to be. He stared at her, powdered sugar on his lashes, blood on his sleeve, heart beating louder than it had in years. And for the first time since the markets closed and his world ended, Ethan Whitaker felt something dangerously close to hope. When's the last time life took everything you thought defined you, and somehow gave you something better? Drop your story below. I read every single one. Hi my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Thank you so for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Ethan woke to the smell of coffee so strong it could raise the dead and the sound of Nina Simone drifting through 100-year-old floorboards. He was on a couch in a parlor he didn't remember entering, shoes off, a quilt tucked around him like his mama used to do when he was 8. Sunlight poured through lace curtains and painted gold stripes across his face. For 3 full seconds he forgot the world had ended. Then he sat up and remembered everything. Jasmine stood at the stove in the kitchen, back to him, swaying just slightly to "feeling good" while she flipped bacon. She wore an oversized Howard University hoodie and leggings, gold cuffs flashing at her wrists every time she moved the spatula. "Mornin', Mr. Whitaker," she said without turning around. "You snore like a freight train, by the way." He rubbed his face. "Sorry. And it's just Ethan now." Mr. Whitaker got repossessed along with the Gulf Stream. She laughed, low and easy, and slid a plate across the island. 3 eggs over easy, cheese grits swimming in butter, bacon crisp enough to snap, and a biscuit the size of a softball. A single beignet sat on the side like dessert for breakfast. "Eat," she said. "You're too tall to be passing out on my antique settee again." He stared at the food like it might vanish. "You always feed strays that bleed on your porch?" "Only the ones who look like they forgot how good grits taste." She poured him coffee thick enough to patch potholes. "Cream's in the cow on the table. Sugar's the glass jar shaped like a pineapple, because my great-auntie thought that was classy." He ate. Couldn't help it. Halfway through the biscuit he realized he was moaning out loud. Jasmine leaned on the opposite counter, arms folded, watching him with quiet amusement. "Better. Embarrassingly better," he admitted. "Good. Now you can tell me why the man who owned half the skyline of Atlanta was barefoot in my azaleas at 3 a.m. So he told her. Not the polished Forbes version, the ugly one. The insider trading accusation, false but loud, the hedge fund run that triggered the margin calls, the board voting him out while he was still on the phone. By the time he finished, his plate was clean and his coffee was cold. Jasmine listened the way some people pray, eyes half closed, head tilted, taking every word into her body. When he stopped talking, the only sound was Nina singing about stars and a brand new day. Finally Jasmine spoke. "My daddy used to say money's like seawater. Drink too much and it'll kill you quicker than thirst." Ethan huffed a laugh that didn't have any humor in it. "Pretty sure I drowned." "Nah," she said, reaching across to wipe a smudge of butter from the corner of his mouth with her thumb like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're still breathing." His heart did something complicated in his chest. The doorbell rang, 3 cheerful chimes. Jasmine glanced at the clock. "That'll be Miss Lorraine come to gossip about the church picnic. You want to hide upstairs or you want to meet half of Savannah's prayer chain before 9 a.m. He surprised them both. "I'll meet him." 30 minutes later he was shaking hands with blue-haired church ladies who called him baby, and pressed Tupperware of pound cake into his hands like he was a hurricane victim. Every last one of them already knew who he was. Apparently the fall of Ethan Whitaker was the lead story on the local news. Yet nobody looked at him like he was broken. They looked at him like he was Jasmine's. By noon the mansion across the street had a foreclosure sign on it. Ethan stood on Jasmine's porch and watched the bank's men change the locks. Jasmine came up behind him, 2 sweet teas in mason jars. She handed him one, clinked her glass against his. "To new beginnings," she said softly. He stared at the house that used to be his empire and felt light. "Yeah," he said, voice rough. "To whatever the hell comes next. When's the last time losing everything actually saved you? Tell me in the comments. Your stories keep me going." The storm rolled in off the Atlantic like Judgment Day. By 2 o'clock the sky over Savannah was the color of a fresh bruise, wind whipping the live oaks until they groaned. Jasmine stood on the back porch of Harlow House watching rain lash the courtyard in silver sheets, phone pressed to her ear. "No, Mr. Hargrove, I understand the grace period ended." "Yes, sir, I know it's 90 days. I'm not asking for charity, I'm asking for—" The bank manager cut her off with the practiced sympathy of a man who'd already made up his mind. She closed her eyes, took the kind of breath that tastes like panic, and said, "Thank you for your time." When she turned around, Ethan was in the doorway holding 2 mugs of chicory coffee like peace offerings. "Everything okay?" he asked. She tried to smile. It wobbled. "Peachy." He stepped onto the porch, handed her a mug, and waited. The rain hammered the tin roof so hard conversation should have been impossible, but somehow his silence was louder. Jasmine lasted 8 full seconds. "Bank's starting foreclosure proceedings on the house," she said, voice flat. Mama took out a second mortgage to cover Daddy's medical bills before he passed. I've been paying what I can, but bookings dropped after the hurricane 2 years ago and," she stopped, shrugged like it didn't just rip her own heart open. Ethan stared at the garden, watching a magnolia petal get beaten into the mud. "How much?" he asked quietly. $218,000 by the end of the month, or they auction Harlow House on the courthouse steps. He nodded once. "I can cover it." Jasmine's head snapped toward him. "Ethan, I've got 11 grand liquid and a watch that'll pull another 80 at pawn. The rest I can borrow against the only thing they didn't seize, 30 acres of raw land up in Beaufort County. It's not pretty, but it's collateral." She set his mug down, stepped close enough that the rain misted his shoulders. "Let me help." For the first time since he'd met her, Jasmine looked small. "I don't take handouts." "It's not a handout. It's a loan. You pay me back whenever. No interest. Or," he said, a half-smile tugging his mouth, "you can pay me in beignet and letting me sleep on that lumpy couch forever. I'm flexible." Thunder cracked overhead. Jasmine studied his face like she was trying to find the lie and coming up empty. "Why would you do this for a woman you met 3 days ago?" He thought about it. Really thought. "Because 3 days ago I had $9 billion and no one who'd cross the street to hand me a beignet when I was bleeding. You did. So yeah, I'd like to return the favor." The rain softened to a hush. Somewhere down the block a screen door slammed. Jasmine reached out, brushed a wet strand of hair off his forehead with fingers that trembled just slightly. "Okay," she whispered. "But we do this proper. Contract. Terms. My attorney, not yours. Deal." He held out his hand. She looked at it, then bypassed it completely and hugged him. Hard. Her cheek pressed to his damp shirt, arms tight around his waist like she was anchoring them both. Ethan's arms came around her slowly, carefully, like she might vanish. She smelled like rain and vanilla and home. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright but steady. "Thank you, Ethan." He swallowed. "Thank you for trusting me when I don't even trust myself yet." Lightning flashed, illuminating them both for one heartbeat. Two broken people holding each other up on a porch older than the Civil War. Have you ever been saved by someone who had the privilege of saving someone at exactly the moment you needed it most? Tell me in the comments. If that hug in the rain just rearranged your feelings, smash the like button and turn on notifications. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and stale coffee, the kind of place where deals got done before the ink dried. Jasmine sat straight-backed in a chair that creaked under her, flipping through the contract Ethan's attorney had overnight. Ethan paced the narrow room, hands in the pockets of borrowed jeans that fit him a little too well, Jasmine's late brother's, from the attic. "You sure about this?" she asked for the third time that afternoon. Ethan stopped, leaned against the desk. "I'm sure. It's clean, 218,000 wired to the bank by week's end. You pay me back in installments, no rush. Or in beignet. Still flexible on that." She signed her name with a flourish, the pen scratching like thunder in the quiet. When she slid the papers to him, their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. The lawyer notarized it without a word, handed them copies, and showed them out into a Savannah afternoon thick with humidity. The storm from yesterday lingered in puddles that reflected the sky like shattered mirrors. They walked back toward Harlow House in silence at first, shoulders bumping on the narrow sidewalk. Ethan carried the folder like it was fragile. "You didn't have to do this," Jasmine said finally. "I know." He glanced at her. "But I wanted to. For the first time in years, I'm doing something because it feels right, not because it pads the bottom line." She stopped under a live oak, moss draping low enough to touch. "What now, Ethan Whitaker? You saved the damsel's castle. Hero gets a reward." He turned to face her, close enough she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "Dinner. Let me take you to dinner. No contracts, no pity. Just us." Jasmine tilted her head, considering. A slow smile spread across her face. "All right. But I picked the place. And you're buying with whatever's left of that 11 grand. Deal. That evening, she led him to a hole-in-the-wall joint on the edge of the historic district, the kind with plastic chairs and menus sticky from years of hot sauce. Live jazz spilled out the open door, trumpet notes curling like smoke. They ordered shrimp and grits for her, oysters Rockefeller for him, and a pitcher of sweet tea that could rot teeth. The band played Ain't Misbehavin' while they talked, really talked. Ethan told her about growing up poor in rural Georgia, how he'd coded his first app at 16 to pay the electric bill. Money became my god, he admitted, cracking an oyster shell. Chased it until it chased me right off a cliff. Jasmine leaned forward, elbows on the table. I get that. After Mama died, this house became my everything. Poured my soul into it because letting go felt like losing her all over again. She stirred her tea, ice clinking. But holding on too tight, it'll break you same as letting go. The band switched to something slower, bass thrumming through the floorboards. Ethan set down his fork. Dance with me. Here. She glanced around at the crowded room, couples already swaying. Here. He held out his hand. She took it. They moved to the tiny dance floor, her head fitting just under his chin. His hand settled on the small of her back, warm through her sundress. She closed her eyes and let the music carry them. When the song ended, they didn't stop. Another started, and Ethan pulled her closer. Jasmine, he murmured into her hair. She looked up. Their faces were inches apart. He kissed her then, soft at first, like testing the water. Then deeper, her hands fisting in his shirt, his arms wrapping tight like he'd never let go. The storm broke outside, rain hammering the windows. Inside, the world narrowed to just them. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Jasmine touched his cheek. That wasn't in the contract. Ethan grinned. Addendum. What's the sweetest first moment that ever caught you off guard in love? Share in the comments. I live for these. The rain came down in buckets the night they didn't make it past the front door. They'd meant to go slow, dinner at her cousin's river house, maybe a walk on Tybee after, but the sky cracked open the second Ethan's truck rolled to a stop in front of Harlow House. Lightning lit up the porch like God himself was taking pictures. Jasmine grabbed his hand and they ran, laughing and slipping on the wet bricks. Keys rattled, the door flew open, and then they were inside, soaked to the bone, breathing hard. Water dripped from her locks onto the hardwood. His white shirt had gone see-through, clinging to every line of muscle he usually hid under tailored suits. Jasmine's sundress stuck to her thighs like it was painted on. Neither of them moved to get towels. Ethan kicked the door shut with his heel. The click echoed. Jazz! His voice came out rough, like gravel soaked in bourbon. She stepped into him first, no hesitation, no games, hands sliding up his chest, fisting the wet fabric. Don't talk. Then she kissed him like the world was ending all over again. It was nothing like the soft jazz club kiss. This one had teeth. Hunger. Years of loneliness poured out in the way she pressed against him, the way he groaned into her mouth and lifted her clean off the floor. Her legs wrapped around his waist like they belonged there. He walked them backward until her spine hit the hallway wall hard enough to rattle the pictures of her ancestors. Neither cared. Hands everywhere. His fingers tangled in her locks, tugging just enough to make her gasp. Hers yanked his shirt open, buttons pinged across the floor like hail. She bit his bottom lip, he growled and spun them, pinning her wrists above her head with one hand while the other traced fire down her side. Lightning flashed again, bleaching the hallway white. In that second she saw his eyes, wild, desperate, alive. Tell me to stop, he rasped against her throat. And I will. Jasmine rolled her hips against him in answer. Try, and I'll kill you. He laughed, dark, wrecked, and carried her up the stairs two at a time. The bedroom door slammed behind them. Clothes hit the floor in a trail, his belt, her dress, the lace underneath that made him swear reverently in 3 languages. They didn't make it to the bed the first time. He took her against the inside of the door, her back arched, his name ripping from her throat like a prayer and a curse all at once. Thunder covered the sounds they made, but the storm inside was louder. Later, minutes, hours, they found the bed. Sheets twisted, headboard knocking rhythm against the wall. She rode him slow, then fast, hands braced on his chest, watching his face like she wanted to memorize the moment he came undone. He flipped her, mouth everywhere, whispering filthy sweet things against her skin until she shattered again, nails scoring down his back hard enough to leave marks he'd wear proudly. When the rain finally eased to a whisper, they lay tangled and breathless, sweat cooling, hearts hammering in sync. Ethan traced lazy circles on her hip. "I think you just brought a dead man back to life." Jasmine laughed, low and satisfied, pressing a kiss to the bite mark she'd left on his shoulder. "Welcome back, baby." Outside, the storm moved on, leaving the air washed clean. Inside, two people who'd lost everything found the only thing that had ever mattered. When's the last time passion hit you so hard it felt like resurrection? Spill the tea in the comments. No judgment here, just heat. The clock in the parlor ticked louder than a bomb. Ethan stared at the torn envelope on the table, Victoria's ultimatum scattered like confetti from hell. Jasmine paced the kitchen, phone in hand, dialing her cousin Leroy, the family attorney who owed her favors from childhood. "Lee. Yeah, it's me. Listen, we got a snake in the garden named Victoria Langford. She's got liens on everything but my good sense." Jasmine's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. She glanced at Ethan, mouthed, "Coffee," and kept talking. He poured 2 mugs, hands steady even if his gut wasn't. 4 days. That's all they had before Victoria pulled the trigger on the foreclosures. His land in Beaufort, gone. Harlow House, auctioned. And them. Whatever this fire between him and Jasmine was, it might not survive the ashes. Leroy arrived an hour later, briefcase in one hand, a box of pralines in the other, "For the nerves," he said with a wink. He spread documents across the dining table. Deeds, liens. The contract Ethan and Jasmine had signed just days ago. "This Langford woman's playing dirty," Leroy said, adjusting his glasses. "She bought the secondary lien on Harlow House through a shell company. Quiet, but traceable. And your land, Ethan? She's accelerating the note. Claims material change in circumstances after your fall." Ethan's jaw clenched. "It's personal. We were engaged once. I broke it off when I realized she loved the empire more than the man." Jasmine's hand found his under the table, squeezed hard. No words, just that touch grounding him. Leroy leaned back. "Options, fight it in court, but that'll take months you don't have. Or negotiate. Buy her out." "With what?" Ethan snapped. "I'm down to pocket change." Jasmine stood, started pulling ingredients from the pantry. Flour, sugar, yeast. "We bake our way out." The men stared. She shot them a look. "Not literally. But Harlow House has history. Gullah-roots, protected status maybe. And Ethan, your land's got wetlands, environmental regs could tie her up." Leroy nodded slowly. "Smart. I can file injunctions by tomorrow. Buy us time." As Leroy packed up, Jasmine walked him out, their voices murmuring on the porch. Ethan stayed at the table, head in hands. Guilt chewed at him like rust on iron. This was his mess spilling onto her life. When she came back, dough rising on the counter for fresh bread, she slid into his lap without a word. Wrapped her arms around his neck, pressed her forehead to his. "Stop it," she whispered. "Stop what?" "Blaming yourself. Victoria's the villain here, not you." He pulled her closer, buried his face in her neck where her pulse beat strong and steady. "I dragged this to your door. And I'd open it again." She tilted his chin up, eyes fierce. "We're in this now. You and me." He kissed her then, desperate, pouring every unsaid fear into it. She kissed back harder, nails digging into his shoulders, reminding him of last night's fire. They ended up on the rug by the fireplace, clothes discarded in haste, bodies moving like they could outrun the deadline. After, tangled in a blanket, Jasmine traced the scratches on his back. "We fight tomorrow. Tonight, we remember why." But the next morning brought worse, a process server at the door with eviction notices. Victoria had pulled strings, bumped the timeline to 2 days. Jasmine signed for them with a steady hand, but Ethan saw the tremor when she thought he wasn't looking. By afternoon, word spread through Savannah's tight-knit circles. Jasmine's family descended, aunts with casseroles, uncles with advice, cousins ready to throw hands. They filled the house with noise and plans, turning crisis into strategy session. Ethan stood on the periphery, watching Jasmine command the room like a general. She caught his eye across the crowd, smiled that private smile that hit him like sunlight. But as night fell, doubt crept in. What if they lost? What if he cost her everything? When's the last time a fight for love meant fighting for your whole damn life? Share your battles in the comments. We're all warriors here. The house was quiet for the first time in 48 hours. Family had finally gone home, dishes stacked in the sink, battle plans scribbled on napkins across the dining table. Only one lamp burned in the parlor, throwing long shadows over the Persian rug. Jasmine sat on the sofa in one of Ethan's old Yale t-shirts, knees drawn to her chest, staring at nothing. Ethan stood at the window, watching rain start again, thin, tired drops that sounded like crying. He spoke first, voice raw from shouting at lawyers all day. "Jazz, there's something I never told you." She didn't turn. "I know." That stopped him. He faced her. "You know." Jasmine reached under the cushion beside her and pulled out a thick manila envelope. The return address, Langford Holdings. Inside were photocopies, bank records, emails, a single photograph. She laid the photo on the coffee table between them like a loaded gun. It was Ethan and Victoria 5 years ago, arms around each other at a groundbreaking ceremony for a luxury condo tower on the exact 30 acres he still owned. In the background, bulldozers clearing wetlands. A local elder, Jasmine's own great-uncle Moses, stood off to the side holding a protest sign. Ethan's stomach dropped through the floor. "I didn't know it was your family's land back then," he said, the words tasting like ash. "I swear on my life, Jazz. The deal came through a blind trust. Victoria handled the acquisition. By the time I saw the site plan, you still signed it." Her voice cracked on the last word. "That marsh fed my people for generations. Uncle Moses lost his shrimping grounds because of that tower. He died 2 years later still trying to get it back." Tears rolled down her cheeks, silent and furious. Ethan sank to his knees in front of her, hands hovering like he was scared to touch. "I was a different man. I didn't ask questions if the numbers worked. I was cruel in my ignorance." Jasmine finally looked at him. Her eyes were red, but the pain in them was older than tonight. "I sat Shiva for that land, Ethan. My mama cried when the cranes went up. And the man who helped kill it has been sleeping in my bed." He flinched like she'd slapped him. "I didn't know," he whispered again, uselessly. She stood, walked to the fireplace, arms wrapped around herself. "Victoria didn't send these to hurt you. She sent them to hurt me. To make me send you away." A bitter laugh escaped. "And it's working." Ethan rose slowly. "Tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this." "You can't fix dead land and broken promises." Her voice broke completely. "I keep seeing my mama's face the day they fenced off the marsh. And I keep seeing your signature on the bottom of the permit." The silence stretched until it screamed. Ethan picked up the photograph, stared at his younger, smugger self. Then, in one motion, he tore it in half, then again, until only confetti remained. "I'll deed the 30 acres to your family trust," he said quietly. "Every acre. No strings. No loan forgiveness, no favors. It goes back to the Harlows tomorrow morning, before Victoria can touch it." Jasmine turned, eyes wide. "That's your last asset. You're my only asset that matters." His voice shook. If I lose you over dirt I never deserved in the first place, then I never deserved you at all. Tears spilled faster now. She pressed a hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd held back too long. Ethan didn't move closer. He stayed on his knees in the middle of the room, palms open on his thighs, letting her decide. After the longest minute of his life, Jasmine crossed the space between them. She dropped to her knees too, cupped his wet face in trembling hands. I hate what you did, she whispered. But I love who you're becoming. And that terrifies me. He leaned his forehead against hers. I'm so sorry, Jazz. I'll spend the rest of my life being sorry if you let me. She kissed him then, salt tears and forgiveness and fear all mixed together. It tasted like heartbreak and hope in equal measure. Outside, the rain kept falling harder, washing Savannah clean. When's the last time someone's past sin collided with your deepest wound, and you still chose love anyway? Lay your heart in the comments. 3:17 a.m. The house was so quiet the grandfather clock sounded like a gavel. Ethan sat on the bottom stair in the dark, elbows on knees, head in his hands. Jasmine stood in the doorway of her mama's old bedroom, suitcase open on the bed behind her, clothes folded in neat, furious piles. He hadn't tried to stop her packing. He knew better. She came down the stairs barefoot, carrying only one bag, small enough to mean she wasn't running far, large enough to mean she was still leaving. I booked the cottage on Tybee, she said, voice hoarse from crying. Just for a few days. I need air that doesn't smell like you. Ethan's heart cracked clean in two. He stood, slow, like any sudden move might shatter what was left of them. Jazz. Don't. She held up a hand. I forgave you tonight. That doesn't mean the hurt stopped. He nodded, throat working. I deeded the land this morning. Leroy filed it at 8:02 a.m. The marsh is yours again. All 30 acres. Titles already in the Harlow family trust. She closed her eyes. A single tear slipped free. Thank you. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I keep thinking about my mama, she whispered. How she used to take me out there at dawn to pull crab traps. How the water smelled like life. And now every time I look at you, I see the cranes that took it away. Ethan took one step toward her, then stopped. I can leave Savannah. Tonight. You'll never have to see me again. Jasmine's head snapped up. That's not what I want. Then tell me what you want, he begged, voice breaking wide open. I'll do anything. I don't know. The words tore out of her. I want to hate you and I want to hold you, and both are killing me. She dropped the bag, crossed the foyer in 3 strides, and crashed into him. Not gentle. Not forgiving. Just need. They hit the wall hard enough to rattle the sconce. Her mouth found his, angry and desperate, teeth clashing, tears mixing. His hands fisted in her shirt like letting go would end him. They didn't make it upstairs. Clothes ripped, literally. She shoved him down on the cold hardwood, straddled him, took him inside her like punishment and salvation at once. He let her set the brutal pace, let her nails rake fresh lines down his chest, let her sob his name when she came apart. After, she collapsed on him, shaking. He wrapped his arms around her so tight she could feel his heart trying to beat its way out of his ribs and into hers. I love you, he whispered into her locks for the first time. I'm sorry it took losing everything to be brave enough to say it. Jasmine went very still. Then she pushed up, looked him dead in the eyes, tears shining. I love you too, she said, voice cracking. And that's why I have to go. She stood, pulled her dress on with trembling hands, picked up the bag again. At the door she paused, hand on the knob. I need to make sure I'm choosing you because I want you, not because you gave the land back. Not because you're broken and I'm the only one holding the pieces. I have to know it's real. Ethan. He stayed on the floor, bleeding from fresh scratches, heart in his throat. I'll wait, he said. However long. Forever if that's what it takes. Jasmine opened the door. Rain had started again, soft and steady. She looked back once. "Don't wait forever," she whispered. "Just wait until I'm sure." Then she walked out into the dark, leaving the door open and the porch light on. Ethan sat there until sunrise, alone in the house that wasn't his, listening to the empty echo of the only woman he'd ever loved walking away. When was the last time loving someone hurt so bad you had to leave, even when every step felt like dying? Tell me in the comments. Tybee Island, 3 days later. The sun was just beginning to burn off the morning fog when Ethan's truck rolled to a stop in front of the little blue cottage on stilts high above the dunes. He hadn't shaved. Hadn't slept. He carried only 2 things, a worn leather journal in his back pocket and a single white camellia he'd picked from Harlow House's garden at dawn. Jasmine was on the porch in an oversized linen shirt, coffee in hand, staring at the ocean like it might give her answers. When she heard the truck door shut, she turned slowly. Her breath caught. Ethan walked the sandy path barefoot, camellia held out like a peace flag. Salt wind whipped his hair, the same wind that tugged at her shirt and pressed it against her body. He stopped at the bottom step and didn't climb. "I'm not here to beg," he said, voice rough from 3 nights of silence. "I'm here to give you the rest of the truth." Jasmine's fingers tightened around her mug. "Ethan." He pulled the journal from his pocket, opened it to a page marked with a ribbon the color of her favorite sundress. "Every morning since you left, I wrote you a letter I never planned to send. This is the last one." He began to read, voice steady even as his hands shook. "Day 1. I sat on your porch until the sun came up and realized I don't know how to breathe in a house that doesn't smell like you. Day 2. I fixed the loose board on the 3rd stair because you always stubbed your toe there. I kissed it better anyway, even though you weren't here to laugh. Day 3. I learned how to make your mama's red rice from your Aunt Rosa. Burned the first 3 pots. She said love tastes like scorched rice sometimes, still worth eating." He turned the page, eyes never leaving hers. "Today, I understand now. Love isn't the land I gave back. It isn't the house I lost or the money I never deserved. Love is the way you looked at me the night you walked out, like I was still worth saving even when I felt worthless. I don't want to own you, Jasmine Harlow. I want to belong to you. If you'll still have a man with nothing but a broke heart and a stubborn hope." He closed the journal, laid it on the bottom step beside the camellia. Then he knelt, one knee in the sand, head bowed. "I love you on purpose. Not because you saved me. Not because I saved your house. I love you because when I'm with you, I remember who I was before the world taught me to be someone else. If you need a week, a month, a year, take it. I'll be right here, building a life worth coming home to. No pressure. No games. Just me. Waiting to love you out loud for the rest of my days." The ocean roared behind him. A gull cried overhead. Jasmine set her coffee on the rail with shaking hands. She came down the steps slowly, each one deliberate, until she stood over him. She picked up the camellia, brushed the petals against his cheek, then cupped his face and lifted it to hers. Tears tracked silver down her cheeks, but she was smiling, small at first, then wide and radiant. "I only needed 3 days to be sure," she whispered. "I missed you so hard it scared me." Ethan's breath stuttered. She sank to her knees in the sand too, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him like the tide coming home. Soft, then deep, then laughing through tears when they overbalanced and fell sideways into the dunes. He rolled her beneath him, hands framing her face, forehead pressed to hers. "Say it again," he begged against her lips. "I love you, Ethan Whitaker. Broke, stubborn, redeemed, mine." He kissed her again, slow, reverent, like every second was borrowed and sacred. When they finally pulled apart, the sun had cleared the fog and painted them both gold. Jasmine tucked the camellia behind her ear, stood, and held out her hand. "Come inside," she said. "I made red rice. Didn't burn it." He took her hand, let her pull him up, and followed her into the cottage without looking back. Behind them, the journal lay open in the sand, pages fluttering to the last blank one where, Later that night, they would write together the first line of the rest of their lives. When's the last time someone loved you exactly as you are, not for what they could get, but for who you became in their light? Share your moment in the comments. Late October, 6 months later. Harlow House glowed like a lantern. Every window was lit, paper lanterns strung through the live oaks, jazz drifting soft and low from the courtyard. Jasmine thought it was just the annual friends and family oyster roast she'd been planning for weeks. She had no idea. Ethan had spent 2 months turning the backyard into something out of a dream. White lights twinkled in the moss. Long tables draped in burlap and lace groaned under low-country boil, cornbread, and her Aunt Rose's famous peach cobbler. All their people were there: cousins, uncles, church ladies, even Leroy in a bow tie, pretending he wasn't crying already. Jasmine stepped onto the porch in a simple cream silk dress that hugged every curve, locks swept over one shoulder with a single camellia tucked behind her ear, the same one from Tybee, pressed and preserved. She looked around, confused by how beautiful everything was. "Ethan, baby, this is too much for an oyster roast," she laughed, turning to him. He was already down on one knee. The entire courtyard went dead silent except for the trumpet player softly holding one long, trembling note. Jasmine's hands flew to her mouth. Ethan wore the same white linen shirt from the night they made up on Tybee, sleeves rolled, looking at her like she was the only star in the sky. In his hands, a small, weathered wooden box, her mama's old recipe box, the one that lived on top of the fridge. He opened it. Inside, nestled on faded note cards that still smelled faintly of vanilla and nutmeg, sat a ring, rose gold, a single flawless diamond flanked by 2 tiny pieces of sea glass the exact color of Tybee at sunrise. "Jasmine Marie Harlow," he started, voice thick. "6 months ago I showed up at your door barefoot and bleeding, with nothing but sins and a broken name. You gave me grits, a couch, and somehow, a reason to live again." Quiet laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone sniffled loudly. "You taught me that a man's worth isn't in his portfolio. It's in how gently he loves the woman who chooses him anyway. I've spent every day since trying to be the kind of man your mama would've invited to Sunday dinner." He had to stop, clear his throat, blink hard. "This box held your mama's recipes. Red rice, okra soup, the pound cake that made me cry in my coffee. Tonight I'm asking if you'll let it hold one more family treasure, the promise I want to keep for the rest of my life." He lifted the ring with shaking fingers. "Marry me, Jazz. Not because I saved your house or you saved my soul. Marry me because every morning I want to wake up reaching for you. Because I want our babies to have your smile and your stubborn heart. Because loving you is the only wealth I'll ever need." Jasmine was already crying, big, messy, happy tears that ruined her mascara and made her cousins cheer. She dropped to her knees in front of him, cupped his wet face, and kissed him soft and slow while the whole backyard hooped and clapped. When she pulled back, forehead to his, she whispered, "Yes. 1,000 times yes." The trumpet player launched into "It Had to Be You." Ethan slid the ring on her finger, perfect fit of course, then stood and lifted her clean off the ground, spinning her while their people showered them in rice and laughter and blessings. Later, under strings of lights, with her barefoot in the grass and him still holding her like she might disappear, Jasmine pressed her lips to his ear. "You sneaky man. I really thought we were just eating oysters." He grinned against her neck. "Best surprise of your life?" She looked at the ring, at the family dancing around them, at the man who'd given her back her land and then given her his future. "No, baby," she said, voice trembling with joy. "You're the best surprise of my life." When's the last time someone planned a moment so perfect you didn't even know you were living inside a dream until it happened? Drop your proposal stories, or the one you're still waiting for, in the comments. 1 year to the day after a barefoot billionaire bled on her azaleas. The wedding was held in the exact spot where the old marsh met the new Harlow land, 30 acres Ethan had signed back to her family and then helped turn into a living memorial. Boardwalks, oyster reefs, a small education pavilion with her mama's name carved in cedar. Today it looked like heaven had come to the lowcountry. White chairs in the grass. Wildflowers everywhere. Spanish moss dripping with baby's breath. A string quartet played Ain't No Mountain High Enough, while 300 people. Family, church folks, even a few Wall Street reporters who'd come to see the miracle, took their seats. Jasmine waited under a live oak older than emancipation, hidden from view, heart trying to beat out of her chest. Her cousin Keisha adjusted the veil. "You ready, baby girl?" Jasmine looked down at her dress, off-shoulder lace the color of fresh cream, fitted through the hips, then flowing into a cathedral train embroidered with tiny camellias. In her hands, the same pressed flower from Tybee, now dried and tucked into her bouquet. "I've been ready since the night he showed up broke and bleeding," she whispered. Keisha laughed through tears. "Then let's go give that man his forever." The quartet switched to a slow, soulful version of At Last. Every guest stood and turned, and the world stopped. Ethan waited at the end of the aisle in a midnight blue tux, no tie, top buttons open, looking like sin and salvation wrapped in linen. When he saw her, his knees actually buckled a little. Leroy had to steady him. Grown men in the front row started crying before she took her first step. Jasmine walked alone, no giving away, for a woman who'd saved herself long before he arrived. Halfway down the aisle she paused, just long enough to mouth, "You okay, baby?" Ethan shook his head, laughing and crying at once. "Never been better." She reached him. They didn't wait for permission, they just held hands like they'd been doing it for lifetimes. The pastor, Reverend Powell, who'd known Jasmine since baptism, grinned wide. "These two done wrote their own vows, and Lord have mercy, y'all ain't ready. Ethan first." He turned to her, both her hands swallowed in his. "Jasmine Marie Harlow. I came to you with empty pockets and a full past. You looked at the worst of me and loved me anyway. You taught me that a man on his knees can still stand tall if the right woman is holding him up. I promise to love you loud on the good days, quiet on the hard ones, and reckless every single day in between. I promise to cook the rice without burning it, to dance with you in the kitchen at 2 a.m., to build you a life so big your mama can see it from heaven and smile. You are my resurrection, my home, my answered prayer. Today, tomorrow, always, I choose you." Jasmine had to fan her face to keep the tears from ruining her makeup. Then it was her turn. "Ethan James Whitaker, you showed up on my porch looking like a storm that forgot to finish you off. I gave you grits, you gave me back my legacy. I gave you shelter, you gave me a future I stopped believing in. I promised to argue with you over the thermostat, to kiss you in the rain, to remind you every day that you are enough, exactly as you are. I promised to let you carry me when I'm weak and to carry you when you forget you're strong. You turned my mourning into dancing, baby. Today I give you my name, my heart, my whole life. I love you in every language heaven ever made." Reverend Powell didn't even try to hold it together. "By the power vested in me, and by the witness of every ancestor smiling down right now, I pronounce you husband and wife. Kiss your bride, son." Ethan didn't wait. He cupped her face and kissed her like the very first time, slow, deep, reverent, then laughing into her mouth when the entire crowd erupted. Rice flew. Trumpets blared. Somebody's uncle started a second line with a handkerchief. Later, under lantern light and a low country moon, they danced barefoot in the grass to "Stand By Me," her dress swirling, his jacket long gone, both of them glowing. He spun her out, pulled her back in, lips to her ear. "Happy 1-year anniversary of the night I lost everything, and found you." She smiled against his mouth. "Best loss I ever witnessed." Epilogue. 5 years later. Harlow House is fuller than ever. 3 wild-haired babies with their mama's smile and their daddy's stubborn chin, running through rooms that ring with laughter. The Marsh Pavilion hosts school kids every week, teaching Gullah history and oyster reef science. Ethan's new company, small, ethical, profitable, builds solar-powered homes for families who once couldn't dream of owning. And every single night, no matter how loud the house gets, he still finds her in the kitchen, slips his arms around her waist from behind, kisses that spot below her ear, and whispers the same words. "Thank you for saving my life, Mrs. Whitaker." She always answers the same. Thank you for letting me, Mr. Whitaker. Then they dance, slow and barefoot, while red rice simmers and the children pretend to sleep upstairs. Because some love stories don't just get a happy ending, they become the beginning of everyone else's hope. What's the moment in your life that felt like God, fate, or pure luck handed you the love you never dared ask for? Drop it below. Let this be the last love letter we write together.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.